So we are back talking about Victoria 3, and this time we're going to look at a whole bunch of maps that were made by Reddit user Ponary Wojtek. He made a whole bunch of maps compiling information from like all the Victoria 3 streams and a variety of things. I'm pretty sure these maps aren't 100% accurate or they don't fully comport with what I remember from the Victoria 3 stream, but we're going to be taking a look at these maps and talking about chiefly what nations might be interesting to play, and also comparing to a Victoria 2 map that has all of the natural resources, and maybe thinking about strategies. This is, of course, going to change once we have game in hand, and these strategies will become obsolete, but maybe just sort of thinking about resources and natural resources and exploitation and this sort of thing might be able to glean some stuff for our first plays once it finally drops, and then I can stop making these types of videos. Okay, so first up, we're going to take a look at this world map, which is quite large. We can zoom in on any area here, and looking at it, notably, a lot of the colonialization still hasn't happened in Africa, and that's mainly where the colonization is at. There's also quite large powers and all this. We're going to take a look at now. This is the map of Victoria 2 of the natural resource yields. And is it zoomed in enough? I think you should be able to see and read the stuff, but we're going to go resource by resource through all of this after looking at some of the maps in more detail. I think the important resources to kind of keep an eye on, though, we're going to go through those really quick first. And that's coal. If you look at the far left column, that is this dark gray color, or dark black. And it looks like there's a lot of coal throughout Europe. There's some coal down here and here in Africa, and also in Madagascar, and I'm assuming that the coal is likely to appear in the same spots as in Victoria 3, and so in terms of making a colonization strategy, thinking about these spots might be good. There's also a lot of coal all throughout China. Okay, so coal is probably going to be one of the more rare or location-dependent resources. If we take a look, coffee, notably mostly in the New World, but there probably should be, there's some in Africa as well. I'm a little surprised not to see any in the Middle East, which is a bit interesting, but okay. Sulfur, I think, I saw a sulfur map, and sulfur seems pretty abundant and pretty diverse, so don't have to worry about that. Silk, all of it's in China. I don't know how exactly you'll be able to unlock silk, or if it would be possible to unlock silk. I know that they snuck silkworms out of China, and so that it was available in some areas, like in Constantinople, although it's not on the map there, for the Victoria 2. Let's see, wool, fruit, opium. Opium's probably interesting. It's this vomit mustardy color. It looks like it appears primarily in, let's see, the Arabian Peninsula here. This is, what is this, Pakistan? No, that's not Pakistan. Afghanistan, and also down here in South Asia, or Southeast Asia. Precious metals is probably another good one. We can see it in Australia here, the south of Africa, not in California, which is notably interesting, but in Victoria 3 we know that it appears in Southern California, based on the Japan run. And then also, let's take a look. Tobacco. I think we might have already talked about tobacco. Looks like it's mainly in the Americas, and tea all over China and India. I think the most important one, though, or the one to maybe think about most in terms of Victoria 3 context, is dyes. And dyes are an input for luxury, some of the higher tier clothier options that use it as one of the input ingredients. And if you look at the dye on the map, it is this dark burgundy color. Hopefully you can read that. It doesn't appear in a whole lot of places. It's mainly India, right? And then a little bit here in Indonesia, which means that also a little bit here in the Americas. And then I know there's some in, well, there's some in Japan in Victoria 3. But I think what this means is it's going to be really hard to compete with someone who's in the English market in terms of making profitable exports of like luxury clothing. Just something to think about, and we'll start looking at some of the more focused maps. Okay, so this is as you might have noticed, a map of India. If we zoom in, we will see that they've done a pretty good job at sorting out various different countries that are all under Great Britain. And I think playing as subject of Great Britain is actually a really interesting start. So it might be the case that playing one of these, like, I do not know the points of difference between, like, Orissa and, like, Awada. Apologies if the pronunciation's incorrect. Yapur. I know the East India Company. All of these would probably be interesting plays because you get access to the British market, you're unlikely to get attacked, and you can kind of do what you want and be buoyed up by the British market, kind of sorting out your input woes, I think. And then we also have primarily all centralized nations, except for the Kazakhs, have yet to be, sort of made whole. Tibet is notably a subject of the Qing, or Qing. I don't know the pronunciation on that either. So this will be interesting. We got some treaty ports as well for France and Portugal, which give them access to this market, I believe. I guess if it gives them access to the full British market, they also would have cheap dyes. So that's something to think about. But India has never been a continent which I've played a lot in any Paradox games, so I don't have too much, to contribute on the India front. Now we take a look at northern Central Europe. I guess, well, don't have the full north part, but Central Europe, mainly just Germany. I think that, so a lot of these German miners around the middle of the map start out in Prussia's market, so that is something to consider when starting a game. You could probably play as one of these and, have a good amount of flexibility, and I don't think Prussia would roll you, but maybe they will. I like playing as smaller countries, and so, yeah. Bavaria is probably also a solid start. Hanover, you get access to the British market. I think both Netherlands and Belgium would be interesting with the idea that you're going to take over the other one pretty early. Let's go into the next map. Alright, so notably, a lot of these in the Americas start out as, not uncivilized, what is it? Decentralized nations. A lot of these Native American nations. And I don't know whether it's easier to conquer them or to colonize them. I don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. Indian territory is interesting. Is that a subject of the United States? Interesting. Playing as a Canadian nation is also probably going to be fairly interesting. And maybe you could look to, throw off the shackles. And that Canada, I think, I've never been too partial to the Canada runs, but Canada might actually also be a really interesting choice. You are locked into the Great British market, and one of the problems with being locked into their market when you are playing as, like, let's say Canada instead of Wales, which we kind of talked about Wales the other day, is that Canada is pretty far from the market hub. And my understanding is you need to, in order to have full market, like, throughput, you need to connect to the hub, which is London. And so it's a bit more difficult than just connecting to your own capital. You have to instead connect to the trade capital of your market. So this is kind of maybe one of the downsides of playing inside another person's market. Okay, let's take a look at another one. And now we have South America. Let's see. It looks like everywhere in the Caribbean is colonized. Central America would probably be an interesting run. I think if you're looking for a region that has a bunch of middling powers, it looks like South America is probably a pretty good choice. I don't really know the political or historical context here. Also, trade ports for the major European powers, but I don't know the political context here. I'm guessing Brazil is the strongest by a large margin. You can also look to colonize Patagonia. If we take a look at the resource map, Patagonia is mostly wool from, Victoria 2. So maybe not the most profitable region to colonize, but one you can go for. I think, yeah. So let's go to the next one. The Mediterranean. I think that there will be a lot of really interesting plays here if you are interested in releasing a nation. And also maybe in Germany as well. You can always play as Prussia and release a smaller nation if you want a bit more of a challenge. Playing as one of the major powers, it's like, I've never been a fan of it. But if we look here, I'm curious to see if you can release the Byzantines from the Ottoman Empire. That might be interesting. No, it's also cool to see all these great British islands and the French islands and this sort of thing. I think the major ones that are going to be supported, or the major countries that are going to be supported or interesting to play here, will be two Sicilies in Sardinia, Piedmont, and Austria can probably release a lot of nations. Or not a lot, but you can release Hungary, and maybe you can release Poland. I don't know exactly where the Polish border is. I think Russia can also release Poland. I will be playing my first run as Tunis, which is a subject of the Ottoman Empire, down here in... Well, I think my face is blocking it now. But in the southwest of this map, which I think we have a better map for that. Yeah, this one's better. And now we're taking a look at North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula here. I think that playing inside of a market is going to be interesting, and so I've already made a video on what I think I'm going to do as Tunis, but if you think about it from like colonization perspective, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, and Tripoli might all be interesting nations to play, because you can kind of colonize south early and then look to trying to become some sort of trade hegemon. I think you have to really worry about France and Spain if you're Morocco, I suppose, a lot with this sort of stuff. But these North African countries start adjacent to Africa, and I'm not sure if these regions in the North Africa, like Tuat, Hagar, Air, Tibestili, I'm not sure on the pronunciations of any of these, quite obviously. If you can start colonizing these immediately, it might be kind of a good nation to play as colonizers. I assume all of these are fairly weak. Egypt seems fairly strong, but you'll have to fight the Ottomans early. But if you don't have these massive malaria bonuses, you can start colonizing down. I'm pretty excited about... When I look at this map, I actually get pretty excited about the notion of playing Tunis, colonizing straight down, and then also eventually colonizing up through here and building a railroad through here, and just in terms of like a transcontinental railroad. I'm not even sure if that's like smart from a gameplay perspective instead of just having a port, but this to me is like exciting from like a roleplay perspective. I think it makes it so you don't need as many convoys in order to get market access, or improves market access if you just railroad through here. And so that's kind of an interesting project in addition to just like the Suez Canal. I think that a lot of the African nations are going to be really rough to play as. But if we take a look, let's take a look at this map now, this Victoria 2 map, and look at some of the resources. We'll see that there's a ton of timber next to the Congo, and also this black area, this is coal. There's also coal here, and precious metals in southern Africa. And let's see, what else? There's coffee in several places in Africa. And so I assume you'll be able to build coffee plantations there. There's cotton, kind of just in this band. If you notice, like if you look through the map, a lot of it is just associated with like latitudes. Like you have the timber up high in the northern latitude, and then down low again in the latitude where you tend to have a lot of rainfall to produce forests, like the Amazon here, the Congo. And also rubber is not on this. I imagine you will get a lot of rubber and precious metal deposits in the Congo, and so the Congo will be like a very good, nice place to colonize for you, not for the Congo. Let's pull me over there. And so, where were we? Yeah, so looking at this map, and then looking at this map, There's also coffee. I don't know what this dark teal is. What is that? Is that just a lake? No, because it's over here. I'm not seeing it here unless it's fish. Maybe it's fish, and then the fish is on a lake. Um, but that's interesting. So I think a lot of planning might have to go into like thinking about, and of course you'll just have to like look at the places yourself. It's interesting that some of these are just way bigger than the others. We'll see how it goes for colonizing. Now we have South Africa, which is mainly already taken up. I know there's pockets of precious metal on the Viki 2 map kind of around here and here, but I'm guessing the Zulu will be pretty hard to take on. Maybe not. Don't really know. It is interesting to see how few centralized nations there are in Africa. But okay. Moving forward, we finally have here. Now, I remember when I was watching the Netherlands run, not all of this was colonized up in here. And so I think some of it's still available, and notably, there were this DEI area. They colonized as the Netherlands, and if we take a look here, that is a bit of a concern. Or well, in the Netherlands run, they colonized here, so it wasn't colonized at the start. And something that really pops out to me is that this is one of the few places outside of that is colonizable that has dyes, which I think might be something that is something to think about early. And so this might be a colony to go for really early, and also maybe just a colony to try and snap up away from the Netherlands. If you look at playable nations here, I think that, well, first of all, it'll be interesting to play as Australia, and then, let's see, I think Dutch East Indies might also be an interesting nation to play as. I don't really know the status on some of these southern or South Asia, Southeast Asia countries, if they'll be interesting to play, because I don't know how powerful they were or like what state they were in. There's got a few colonial colonizable places here. If we zoom out, and we can take a look at the map again and talk about the resources, and a little bit for grain seems to be everywhere. Based on this map, I'm guessing you could grow it everywhere. I was reading that one of the outputs of grain is wine, and so this will be just kind of something to keep in mind. I think an interesting thing might be, so if you're playing, actually, if you look, there's, at the Middle East, there's a ton of grain areas, and one of the outputs is wine, but I'm guessing that in all of the Middle East, the wine will be a taboo. So what you can do is have a bunch of grain places, and look to, you could take off the export tariffs on grain, right? Which will cause the price of grain to go up, and you will just export more of it, and which will make the grain farms extremely profitable, which will make it so you can have more grain farms, which will really push down the price of grain. I think this is kind of a unique opportunity for the Muslim countries, because I assume the alcohol, they will not want to consume it themselves, so you can use it just like as an export good. And to me, this is like a fascinating idea where you make it really easy to increase standard of living on your lower level pops, because of this whole interaction where you can really push down the price of grain because the price of wine is so high. And I think you'll have this interesting choice to make with any type of production line where it has two outputs, because you can try and really rise the price of one output and depress the price of the other, if the other is an input good or a consumption good, as a way of trying to make one industry really profitable, or to make your pops really happy because they have cheaper standard of living. If we look at fish is kind of in a ton of places. I'm assuming any coastal place will be able to build fisheries didn't want to think too much about it. Dyes we already talked about a lot. I think that the fact that the UK has so much access to dyes is going to give them a really strong competitive advantage in the clothier things. Another thing is, if you are part of Great Britain's market, the clothiers have the output of simple clothing and luxury clothing. You can again do the same thing where you try and push up the price of luxury clothing by exporting it to various nations, which should be easy because you have a competitive advantage because you have such cheap dye, in order to push down the price of simple clothing to make your pops happy and to increase the standard of living for the lower strata. It's kind of an interesting thought to think about. I think we have cotton in a whole bunch of places. Mainly, I guess, at this sort of, what is this, like 30 degrees latitude. A lot of it in the south, in the Americas. We have the Egypt here, a little bit in North France. I guess it's not in too many areas, and then quite a bit here. I'm guessing that a lot of places, or any place in this band is going to be able to build cotton really early, which I think is important because fabric, I think when you're kickstarting an economy, if you don't have one of the big starting economies, you want to go fabric, timber, and construction, because you build the construction industries, it increases the demand for both fabric and timber, which makes these industries more profitable. And so fabric is also used as an input for the clothes, which is like one of the early goods. And so like going fabric, timber, and like food early seems like a good way to kickstart an economy and both try and get people employed and try and increase standard of living. For coffee, looking at it, we have, of course, Central America, and then kind of down here in South America. And I'm guessing, again, it's going to be like a latitude band where you're mainly focused around here, kind of in the, I guess, minus 30. I don't know exactly how latitude is done. Get some of it in Indonesia as well. I'm guessing any countries or like states in this band will probably be able to produce it. With their arable land. Victoria 3 has a lot of flexibility. This Victoria 2 map, I'm not sure exactly how Victoria 2 goes, but it seems to me that you don't get to choose your outputs, and in Victoria 3 you're going to choose your outputs, so maybe it's better to think of terms of latitude, except for the precious metal and the coal, it's probably going to be more localized. Cattle can be built in a bunch of places. It's going to give you meat. I think it gives you other stuff as well, depending on the mode of production, but I don't really know. Sulfur, there was a sulfur map. I guess I should have pulled that up. Maybe I can pull it up one moment. Okay, while I was taking a look, I actually found something pretty interesting, which looks like it's some of the early Victoria 3 RGO maps, and so we can take a look at these as well, I suppose. So this is for banana production. I think bananas and all fruit are a luxury good, and so if you are planning on colonizing, in Africa, for example, this will be kind of a good way to think about maybe where you should pick up colonies. Here's one for coal, which it's in a ton of places, but I think if you don't have your own native supply of coal, this is kind of not a very good thing for you, and you will want to try and do that. I'll put myself over here where there's giant ocean. And these are interesting. These are, I think, pretty early. Again, if we look at these, it's sort of playing out where it's about looking at the band of latitude, and also very, very rich in this like African areas or in terms of very flexible in terms of what you can build. I don't know how much arable land they'll have, so it's both what you can build and how much arable land you have. Here's cotton. Notable that like all the Mediterranean can make cotton, which I think is probably makes Mediterranean nations kind of just like a nice start if you were playing as a small country, just in general, because you can kind of kickstart by building, the timber and the fabric. At least in the ones where you're in the North Africa, I'm guessing won't have too much access to wood, or maybe not even any. again, we see kind of rich in the same band, and this is dyes. A lot more dye than there was on the Vicky 2 map, though, and also a ton of dye potential in Africa, which I was unaware of. So this will be really nice, and this is probably something that you're going to want to go for early, because I think it's the tier 2 production method that uses dyes. This is fishing, and fishing is capped. That is interesting. It's also every coastal province. And I'm wondering how they decide which coastal provinces are going to yield more. Is there numbers on these? I can't tell. Oh, there is numbers on these. Ah, so that's maybe a little bit too much to get into. I'm planning on doing a Tunis run, so I guess I'm kind of very interested in what Tunis looks like. It looks like you can make 7. Interesting that it's capped. Also, I imagine there's, I was reading a post that said something about there being an RNG element, so looking at gold, I'm guessing this got phased out if it's RNG, but just, again, it's like the South Africa and Australia. Interesting. Gold mining capped. Interesting. So maybe this is the provinces where you can discover gold, and these are the ones that already have gold mines. Iron is going to be another thing I think you really want to have a native supply of somewhere in your market, preferably close to your capital. And this is because it is one of the inputs. Both iron and hardwood. It's one of the inputs for making weapons, and so if you can cut off someone's supply to weapons, like let's say I am in, like, what is it? Let's find a place that doesn't have iron. Let's say I'm in Madagascar, and I'm getting my iron I'm importing it from Egypt. If you just block the lane, now I can't get iron, right? And so now the cost of, if I have a bunch of military factories here, the cost of everything is going to just skyrocket, and I'll just hit a goods shortage. And so I think that this is something to think about. Also, like, the supply lines in general, I think, are going to be important if you don't have certain goods close to home, because people can strategically cut them off. I wonder how much iron there is in... I'm thinking about my Tunis run right now, and I'm wondering how much iron there is in Sardinia. I imagine it should be a lot. I guess I can't really zoom in very well on this map. Oh no. Yeah, so I'm probably going to be upgrading, or I have upgraded my computer, I just haven't set it up. And so this will be something looking forward. Like right now I'm having a hard time zooming out because my Windows is frozen. So why don't I pause this and then I'll zoom out. Okay, after some technical difficulties, we are back looking at the iron. Although I think we looked at it quite a bit, and we're just going to take another quick look. And just, this is something I think to think about early on, especially it's the input for tools as well. And so I think tools is something where if you just pull it out of an economy, it really just like will grind everything to a halt. And so the inputs for tools are going to be important as well. Because if you make tools really expensive, it makes everything down the line really expensive, and it disrupts the chains. If we take a look at lead, lead is available in noticeably fewer places than iron, although I do not think it is as important, but that kind of remains to be seen on the release of the game. I am excited to see that lead is available in Tunis, because I'm going to be playing in Tunis for my first run, and so that's nice. Also want to take Sardinia back for everywhere can make livestock. Interesting. But it is, it's not capped, it's arable. So I'm guessing that, well, let's take a look at these maps, because they have different things indicated. So I'm guessing the capped ones It's just a certain number for that individual state. And the arable ones, you have to decide what you want to plant there, but you can plant this stuff. So banana plantations, let's move me back over here, I guess. Banana plantations, arable, coal capped, coffee arable, cotton arable. It's difficult to read, but dyes is arable. Fishing is capped. Gold fields are discoverable, so I guess they don't start and they don't necessarily always spawn. There are some gold mines already there and they're capped. Iron mining capped, lead mining capped, livestock ranches arable. And then logging is capped. And it looks like you can log most places, just not in the Sahara. Basically, if it's if it's a desert, you can't log there. But some places are going to have more logging than others. I know I had seen bonuses for more productive logging for both Brazil and Russia, and so I think being aware of which areas are going to be really, really good at getting the base level inputs, like timber, is important because you can try and get a trade agreement with them because they can produce it cheaper than you can if you can trade it with them. And so, which doesn't mean you should necessarily not have any domestic production of it for like strategic reasons, but if you want to make your inputs cheaper, you can try and import it from places that have huge bonuses. Which, if we look back at the Victoria 2 map, the areas that, whatever resource is on the Victoria 2 map, it probably is kind of a good indicator for what areas are going to have bonuses. Like, northern South America is probably going to have bonuses for coffee. So even though you can build coffee plants all in this giant band, it might be most productive over here. And so this might be a good map to look at to kind of see what in-game would be a good place to check out for trading, for trying to get just the cheap goods where you are like importing the wood from Russia, for example. But okay, keep on going. Corn only available in the Americas. Interesting. Oop. No, that's not what I wanted. Also, sorry for the ad. I just realized I'm showing everyone an ad as well. For a weightlifting belt, because I lift. I know I don't look it. Millet is, again, localized, which is somewhat interesting. Was I showing an ad on this one too? No, I wasn't. And then oil, which is going to be, I assume, more of a late game kind of tech. Oops, sliding me over. So maybe this is worth a study, because I think it doesn't appear on the map initially and you have to discover it, and that it will be important. And so I guess if you know where oil is discovered naturally, it doesn't look like there's any place that's really colonizable at the start of the game that has oil. We can zoom in a little, hopefully not make my computer freak out. Oop. That's not what I wanted. One moment. Okay, I've opened the remaining ones in new tabs so that A, you don't have to look at the ads, and B, it'll be a little bit... Ooh, we can zoom in and have a little bit more control, it looks like. So, it looks like there aren't a tremendous amount of places for oil, and none of them are like colonizable at the start of the game. I think that the Dutch start off with this. These are going to be kind of like hotspots for oil. I'm assuming that one can acquire because these countries are relatively weak. This is Tripoli here. This is the Iraq region of the Ottomans. Also a bunch of oil in Russia. Interesting that Japan has oil. Didn't realize that. Maybe they didn't realize that either in World War II. But okay. Again, it's going to be... This is a different text. It's going to be discoverable. So it doesn't start there at the start of the game, but it will appear. I don't know if there's RNG for the discoverables. If there is, that'll be extra interesting, but I'm guessing, again, it'll be kind of like Middle East, Russia, you know, Americas here. Like, it'll still be regional as to where it is. This is opium plantations for arable, all throughout kind of this... I don't know what if to call this like Central Asia, but Asia around here. Interesting to see just kind of a random smattering over here in Africa. So that might be some land to go to in order to get a domestic opium supply. Otherwise, you're going to have to import it. Huh. Interesting. Also has the numbers for all these. Rice farms, obviously going to be in Asia. I wonder if rice also makes booze, like rice makes sake and wheat makes wine as one of the outputs for the different production methods. Rubber is going to be basically in all of the colonial areas, or the major colonial areas. Rye farms, Northern Europe for the most part. Silk, it's going to be arable, and again, we have mainly China, it looks like. I know that they get a special tech that gives them a bonus, but also all these other countries as well that imported the technology into their country. Excited to see it in Sicily. I think with my Tunis run, I am really kind of going to be trying to take Sardinia and Sicily at some point. And so this is kind of something that's been on my mind, is what do the natural resources look like here? Like I was excited to see lead in Tunis. Okay, sugar plantations, which I think sugar is one of the big ingredients in making alcohol. And so just something to think about. A lot of it is, kind of in this temperate, wet band. Which, I'm now looking through all of this, there's just a ton of it in, like, this Africa region for, like, a bunch of different resources. And so you're, I think, really going to want to try and rush for this. And, obviously it's the colonization you have left to do. Sulfur mining is capped. It looks like it is pretty well distributed all throughout the world. Going to check in on Tunis. That's a nice big supply, I think. 24. Tunis notably is one state, which is kind of good to confirm. And then here we have tea plantations, which are pretty localized in the east. But we also have just like a ton of flexibility for this land here in the Congo, where it looks like you can just grow anything for the most part. Wow, 100 arable lands, that's a lot. So different states are different degrees of, notice it's 100 again, fertile, and so this might also be something to look at where you are like, okay, which is the most fertile land, like the 71 here, and you try and prioritize the colonial regions or colonizing regions that have a lot of arable land, but tobacco plantations. Looks like pretty widespread, temperate. Whaling is notably way different than fishing in that it's only available in some regions. Like, you cannot whale from the Mediterranean, which makes a lot of sense. You can't even whale from most of Africa, which is kind of interesting. It looks like the colder places are where you can whale. Like, notably, like, you don't get hurricanes in South America, at least not right now, because it's too cold in these waters to get hurricanes, so you don't get, like, this, like, hurricane effects like you do in North America here. And so that's pretty interesting. But yeah, cold regions can whale. Cool. And then we have wheat farms, which is noticeably like they have separated all the different grains. I'm guessing all the grains, depending on your production method, can also produce alcohols, which was kind of leading into the strategy I was talking about with Middle Eastern countries where alcohols is taboo. And so you can push up the price of alcohol by taking away the export license and exporting it, which will make every factory that produces alcohol way more profitable, and making them more profitable on the alcohol. One of their other outputs is grain, will lower the price of grain, or it should, if my understanding of economics and the engine is correct, which could be very nice. Because so the idea is if the wheat farm is profitable on the alcohol, you can expand it and expand it and expand it, which dramatically increases the supply of grain, right? And so the increase in the supply of grain will push the price of grain down. And so what you do is you don't, you have an export tariff on the grain, and you get rid of the import tariff on the grain, so that'll depress the price of grain a lot while simultaneously increasing the price of alcohol, and you're just doing this to increase the standard of living on your pops. And as the standard of living goes up, it'll be easier for them to get new qualifications and enter like kind of upper level classes and like or what is it, interest groups and stuff like this. And so this might be a really good strategy specifically with countries where they have a taboo on alcohol. And there will probably be other effects like this or things you can go for, but this will be an interesting strategy. I'm hoping to employ it with Tunis, maybe, although I don't want to build grain farms early because I don't want to empower the landowners. So that'll be pretty interesting. I'm going to pull up a different thing. Okay, I wanted to just take another quick look at some of the capped resources. By the way, this is like, the person said this was like pretty far in advance, so these numbers probably aren't final, but some more of the capped resources just to kind of get an idea of where it produces a lot. This is for logging, seeing a lot of it like here in the US, in the southern region, and I'm guessing Brazil's going to have a whole ton of it. 25? Maybe this isn't so big. I imagine the regions that have, really big, there's noticeably less here than there is in Brazil. The regions that have really high numbers are probably also going to have bonuses to production and are probably good places to import from. Like, look here in Russia, 35, 30, 29. And then if you look like kind of over here in the like Middle East, it's like just these small numbers where you're not going to really be able to build a lot of it, and you're not going to be able to build it tall to get the economies of scale bonuses. The economies of scale bonuses cap out at 21, and they are pretty substantive. So, if you're getting a 20% bonus, like here in Russia, from your economies of scale, and then like another 20% from like just a natural bonus to the region, it's going to be hard to be competitive with some of these other like inputs for the natural resources. And so I think that's a good way of looking at it. If we take a look, this is for lead mining, some big numbers here. And what is this, like the Midwest? It looks like 60 seems huge. Not that much in South America. Kind of a smattering throughout Europe here. Good amount here in the UK. Decent amount here in northern China. I guess we'll take a quick look. Ooh, big numbers for Australia. Couldn't get the full economies of scale bonuses. The economies of scale bonuses might end up being really important specifically for these like natural like resource inputs. Taking a look at iron mining. Got a good amount in the US. And looking at South America, got some here and there. It doesn't seem like quite as much as the US. Let's take a look at Africa. Because you might have to colonize Africa in order to get iron, so there's some big numbers kind of here in the Congo. Congo also has a bunch of precious metals, but that is used for more modern production. Ooh, just a ton. Thick in Europe with just a lot of iron. And a lot also just all throughout Sweden and Scandinavia. Iron seems relatively abundant. I'm not seeing anything that just like jumps out like a 60 or something. Just like the biggest iron mining in the world. I guess iron's... Ooh, there's a 50. Hot. And a 64 over here, so maybe they can make extra well. Coal mining. Now, coal seems like a resource that is not going to be everywhere, and some places are going to have a huge bonus. Like here, was this a 70 in Kentucky? That's big. I should know my U.S. geography better. I feel uncomfortable naming these states, even though I think I know them, because what if I don't know them? I guess I have the excuse that I'm an American. I almost never play strategy games in the U.S., so I also don't get the like... I can name European like regions a lot better. Looking through Africa, there's a lot of coal, especially in the southern area. We've got a 52 here, so there might be a big bonus. Noticeably no coal in Tunis for my Tunis run, but there is coal in Sardinia. A lot of coal here in Germany, or I think this is Prussia. It might be Prussia and Austria, so they might be good to import from. A lot in the UK as well. I always am reminded of UK coal from Europa Universalis. Decent amount around as well. And so, yeah, I just wanted to take a quick look at those like resource maps. Let's go to the full big map of Victoria and just talk a little. Well, I think we talked a lot about a lot of things. This video is getting pretty long. Talking about the different regions, what areas might be like good, and also just thinking about how the resources on the map might affect play. It's. I mean, there's only so much we can do before getting into the game, and then once you're in the game, this is something you can do a lot more of. But like things to be aware of ahead of time is how I think you can try and import some of the production, like the base resources, and try and get it cheaper than you can produce it yourself. Specifically, like thinking of timber from Russia, I'm guessing will be like one of the ways you could do that. And also thinking about how when your production has two outputs, you can look to really depress the price of one of those outputs and have the other output really high. And so we talked about this in the context of grain in the Middle East, how if grain has two outputs, and one of those outputs is just grain and the other output is alcohol, this creates an opportunity for just trying to jack up the price of alcohol, because you don't care if the price is high, because your pops don't really like consuming it anyways, and then export it and use that to depress the price of grain while still having the grain farms profitable. So like the real problem with like trying to depress the price of a good a lot is that if the factory only has one output and that output is the good you're trying to reduce, you make the factory unprofitable, right? But if it has two outputs, you can depress one by raising the other, which is a very interesting type of interaction where you can kind of try and choose which price you want to be low and still have the factory be profitable, which allows you to continue to expand the factories or grain farms or what have you. And so it'll be interesting to see, I think that ahead of time, something that's worth thinking about is that you can try and I think you want to try and think about which goods you want expensive and which goods you want cheap in your markets. And then you have to try and play this puzzle game to figure out, how am I going to make this good cheap and how am I going to make this good expensive? You want goods cheap because I think two reasons I can think of, at least right now. If they are a consumable good, when they're cheap, they're more accessible to pops, which increases pops' quality of life. That's first. And second, when they are an input good, it makes whatever industry they are a part of way more profitable. Reasons to increase the price of a good is you make the industry that is producing it more profitable. And this is I think the primary reason for doing it, because tariffs are based off of the base price of the good, not the current price of the good. But if you have a ton of an industry and the price of the good they produce is a lot, then the industry will be extremely profitable. And so the pops will have more money to spend on consumer goods, the quality of life will go up, all these sort of cascading effects where you're like cycling money through your economy. So in general, if you have I think a good to go for to try and make expensive might be like arms, and exporting arms might be a decent strategy because you can just shut off the exports if you go to war and shoot down the price when you are the one who's eating your arms, and when other people are eating your arms, you just try and crank up the price to make your arms industries more profitable. For all the reasons that I described it being good. Anyways, this video has gotten quite long talking about maps and resources. As far as discussion goes, is this giving anyone ideas in terms of where they think they're going to start, or where do you want to start? I'm going to be starting in Tunis. That's the plan. Oop. Ah, I can't zoom in on Tunis. That's the plan. I'm guessing it will not go very well because I think Tunis is really weak, and I think I'm just going to get stomped by France. But if I don't, oop, if I don't, I think I've got a lot of ideas for how to exploit the game's systems. But all this planning kind of goes out the window once you're playing and once the game releases. Anyways, if you like this video, feel free to do the YouTube algorithm stuff. You know, like, comment, subscribe, share, and or rewatch. And if you've been sitting for more than a couple hours, maybe go outside and take a walk. Especially if you're going to be sitting for several hours playing Vicky 3. Oh, baby. Really looking forward to it. 5 more days. A little less than 5 more days, actually. Releases at 9 a.m. Pacific, by my understanding, 6 p.m. in Sweden, from what I've heard. Yep, and have a good one, everyone.